The orchestra played like liquid gold. The party shimmered with diamonds and champagne. But 9-year-old Nancy Herbert heard something no one else could. Not the celebration, but a child's desperate cry bleeding through the mansion wall. "Help! I'm hungry." While the billionaire groom kissed his stunning bride, Nancy knelt by a broken panel in the forgotten hallway. She wore her late Grandpa Jim's dog tags around her neck, her small fingers covered in plaster dust. She was paid to be invisible. Her mama was just the maid, but she had just found a boy buried alive behind the wallpaper. And the monster who put him there? She was standing in the ballroom right now, draped in diamonds, smiling at 300 guests who believed nothing evil could exist inside a place this beautiful. But Nancy knew the truth Grandpa Jim had taught her. Courage ain't the absence of fear. It's doing right when fear's screaming louder than your heartbeat. Tonight, a little black girl with cornrows and hand-me-down clothes would have to scream louder than her terror. Because if she stayed silent, Nathan Douglas, the billionaire's 7-year-old son, would die in the dark, and his father would never know. Nancy pressed her ear against the cold silk wallpaper during the billionaire's wedding. Everyone else heard music and clinking crystal, but she heard a whisper. The music was too loud. It bounced off marble floors and soared toward chandeliers that looked like frozen waterfalls. The Douglas estate ballroom felt like it was trying to contain thunder. Nancy sat on a wooden stool tucked behind heavy velvet curtains, small for 9 years old, her dark brown skin glowing amber in the golden light. Her cornrows were neat, the colorful beads at the ends clicking softly when she moved. Practical, just how Mama liked it. From her hiding spot, she watched the party. It was an ocean of expensive white faces in designer gowns and black tuxedos. Mr. Ben Douglas, the billionaire, was getting married. His third wedding, Nancy knew, because she'd heard the other staff whispering about it. Her mother, Eunice, was flying around the ballroom right now, her gray maid's uniform crisp, her face tight with exhaustion, carrying silver trays of tiny complicated appetizers that probably cost more than their rent. Nancy was supposed to be in the staff kitchen with a coloring book, but the kitchen smelled like boiled lobster, and her stomach hurt from the heat. She'd slipped out 20 minutes ago. No one noticed. People like them, her mother always said, were paid to be invisible. Nancy was naturally good at it. She watched the new wife, Karen Thompson, soon to be Karen Douglas. The woman was tall and stunning, poured into a diamond-studded wedding gown that caught light like shattered stars. She laughed a sound like tiny bells, but her blue eyes never smiled. They were sharp, scanning the room like a hawk hunting mice. When Karen's gaze passed over the black servers, her smile tightened into something ugly. It was a look Nancy knew too well, the look white people gave when they saw a stain on their perfect world. Nancy felt the familiar pang of restlessness, sharp and insistent. She was 9. She didn't care about champagne or boring adult conversations about stocks and vacation homes. She slipped from behind the curtain. The ballroom was massive, but the adjoining hallway offered escape. This hallway was different. Dark, lined with oil paintings of ships and storms, and stern white men in stiff collars who looked permanently angry. The music from the party was muffled here, just the dull thump of bass. Nancy walked on the Persian runner, tracing patterns with her worn sneakers. She leaned against the wall, enjoying the cool plaster through the thin silk covering. She touched the dog tags around her neck. Grandpa Jim's. He'd been a war veteran, Bronze Star recipient, the bravest man she'd ever known. His voice echoed in her memory, rough as sandpaper. Courage ain't the absence of fear. It's doing right when fear's screaming louder than your heartbeat. Nancy missed him. He'd died 2 years ago, but she still heard his wisdom. She leaned her head back. Scratch. Nancy froze. The sound was soft, right by her ear, like fingernails dragging on wood. She held her breath. The house was old, probably rats. Her mama said all big houses had rats, even billionaire houses. She pressed her ear flat against the wall. The wallpaper felt rough against her dark skin. She heard it again. Not a scratch. A voice. Help. So faint she thought she'd imagined it. A small voice. Weak. Desperate. Please. I'm hungry. Nancy's heart slammed into her throat. She looked up and down the empty hallway. The sound was coming from inside the wall. Hello, Nancy whispered at the wallpaper. A faint gasp came from the other side. Then frantic, desperate scratching. Nancy looked closer. She saw the outline of a huge, ugly painting, a hunting scene with dead birds. Next to it, low to the ground, where wooden molding met wall, she saw a dark line, like a small panel meant to hide pipes or wires, painted over to match the wallpaper. It was loose. She knelt, her hands trembling. This was wrong. She should get Mama. But Mama was working, and Mama would be angry she'd left the kitchen. Help me. Nancy thought of Grandpa Jim. Don't look away. She put her small brown fingers into the crack and pulled. It resisted, stuck with old paint, then gave with a soft pop. It wasn't really a panel, just a piece of loose drywall hidden by wallpaper. Behind it was darkness. Cold, damp air puffed out, smelling of dust and something sour like fear. Hello, she whispered into the blackness. Her hand reached in. She touched cobwebs, then rough brick. Her fingers went deeper into the space between wall studs. She touched something. Warm. Skin. Nancy nearly screamed. An arm. A thin, small arm covered in cold sweat. From the darkness came a sound, not relief, but panic, as if her touch was a spider. The arm tried to pull away, but was too weak. Who are you? Nancy breathed. And Nathan. Nathan Douglas. The voice stuttered, broken. She locked me in. Please. I'm so thirsty. Nathan? Nancy knew that name. Mr. Douglas's son from his first marriage. The boy who was supposed to be at boarding school. Her mama had been cleaning his room just last week, packing his things away. Before Nancy could answer, she heard a sound that turned her blood to ice. Footsteps. Sharp clicking heels on marble at the end of the hall. Nancy yanked her hand back, scraping her knuckles hard on the rough plaster edge. Sharp pain shot up her arm. She tried to push the panel back, but it wouldn't sit right. She fumbled with it, her fingers slick with the boy's cold sweat. What are you doing? The voice was sweet, but cold as winter. Nancy sprang up and spun around. Karen, the bride, stood 10 feet away. Her diamond dress glittered like broken glass. Her blue eyes weren't smiling. They were cold and sharp, like chips of ice. Karen walked slowly toward Nancy. She didn't look like a bride anymore. She looked like the portraits on the wall, beautiful and dangerous. I asked you a question, child. I was lost, Nancy stammered, her voice small, looking for the bathroom. Karen stopped just a foot away. Nancy had to crane her neck to look up at her. The woman smelled strongly of jasmine and something bitter underneath, like bleach. The bathrooms, Karen said softly, each word precise, are in the other direction. This is a private wing. Her eyes narrowed. You're the maid's daughter, aren't you? Eunice's girl. Yes, ma'am. Nancy's voice came out as a squeak. Karen's gaze scanned Nancy from head to toe, then stopped on her right hand. Nancy looked down. Her knuckles were bleeding, fingertips covered in white plaster dust and gray grime from a hole. Nancy quickly clenched her fist and hid it behind her back. But Karen had seen it. The bride's smile was terrifying. All teeth, no warmth, nothing reaching those ice-chip eyes. You know, Nancy, she said, her voice dropping to a silky whisper. I detest snooping. She leaned down, her face inches away. My mother always told me that curious little girls often get lost. Sometimes they get lost for good. Nancy's heart beat so hard she thought it would crack her ribs. She thought of the boy in the wall, Nathan. She thought of Grandpa Jim's weathered face. Be brave, baby. Nancy lifted her chin. Just a little. She didn't cry. I wasn't snooping. I was just lost. Karen studied her for a long, terrible moment, looking at Nancy like deciding where to step on an insect. See that you find your way back to the kitchen, Karen said, her voice suddenly sharp as a blade. If I see you out here again, I will make sure your mother doesn't just lose her job. She smiled wider. I will make sure she never works in this city again. Do you understand me? Yes, ma'am. Karen turned, her dress rustling like dry leaves. She walked back down the hall toward the thumping music. She didn't look back. Emily waited until the heel clicks faded. When she was finally alone, her legs gave out. She slid down the wall, landing hard on the floor, shaking so badly her teeth chattered. Karen wasn't just threatening her. Karen knew. She knew Nancy had found the hole. She knew Nancy had touched Nathan. Nancy stared at the badly hidden panel. She knew with cold certainty that Karen was the one who'd put him there. She pulled her knees to her chest, mind racing. Why? Why would a bride lock a little boy in a wall? Then she remembered. 2 weeks ago, her mama thought Nancy was asleep on the cot in the staff break room. Mama was talking to Darlene, the head cook. She hates him. Mama had whispered, exhausted. The new one, Karen. She hates little Nathan. Always has. It's always the way, Darlene muttered, stirring sugar into coffee. New wife doesn't want the old wife's child reminding the husband of his past. But Mr. Douglas adores that boy, Mama said. Or he used to. Before she came. Before she came, Darlene repeated. Now he only sees what she tells him to see. She convinced him the boy was troubled, acting out, needed special boarding school. Packing a 7-year-old off to Connecticut, Mama sighed. Heartbreaking. The boy was crying all last week. Told me he didn't want to go. Said Karen scared him. Said she told him if he didn't stop crying, she'd give him something to really cry about. Hush now, Darlene said, noticing Nancy stir. Nancy had pretended to sleep, but she hadn't forgotten. Now, sitting on the cold floor in the dark hallway, it all made sense. Nathan hadn't been sent to boarding school. He was right here. Karen hadn't just packed him away. She'd hidden him, buried him alive in the wall. The wedding music surged from the ballroom, a wave of laughter and celebration. Mr. Douglas was in there toasting his new wife, while his son was suffocating just dozens of feet away. Nancy looked at her bleeding knuckles covered in plaster dust. She was the only one who knew. A 9-year-old black girl, and a bride who just threatened to destroy her mother. Nancy got to her feet. Her legs still felt like jelly, but the shaking was different now. Not just fear, anger. Cold, hard anger inherited straight from Grandpa Jim. She put her ear back to the wall. Nathan, she whispered, fierce and low. Nathan, can you hear me? Don't be scared. My name is Nancy. I'm going to get you out. There was no answer, just terrifying, heavy silence. Had he passed out? Had Karen heard him? Nancy pressed her ear so hard against the wallpaper it ached. The dull thump-thump of party music was like a giant's uncaring heartbeat. Then she heard it. Movement. A horribly weak sound, like cloth sliding on brick. He was still alive. Water. His voice was like dry leaves crumbling. Need water. Nancy stood up. She had to get to the kitchen. She had to walk back toward the noise, the people, and the one person she was most afraid of. She forced her jelly legs to move. She walked out of the dark hallway, back toward the blazing light and sound. She kept her head down, bloody knuckles hidden in her pocket, making herself small. Invisible. She skirted the ballroom's edge, hiding behind a row of tall potted palms. She could see the kitchen entrance, a whirlwind of activity. White-jacketed servers shouted orders. Chefs yelled back. Her mother, Eunice, rushed out, face pale and dotted with sweat. Mama saw her, her face, already stressed, crumpled into fear and anger mixed together. She grabbed Nancy's arm, pulling her into a small alcove where cleaning supplies were kept. Nancy, what did I tell you? Where have you been? Mama's voice was a harsh whisper. I have been sick with worry. I told you to stay put. I'm sorry, Mama. Nancy's mind raced. She couldn't tell the truth. Karen's threat was too real. My stomach hurts. I think I'm going to be sick. It was a good lie. Believable. Mama's anger melted a little, replaced by tired sympathy. Oh, baby. She sighed, wiping a stray bead from Nancy's forehead. You look pale as anything. It's probably that lobster smell. I can't stand it either. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a half-full bottle of water. Here, take this. Go to the staff pantry. It's quiet. Sit down, drink this, and do not move. I mean it, Nancy. If Mr. Langston finds you wandering, I'll lose this job. You understand? Yes, Mama. Go now. I'll check on you when this dinner rush is over. Mama gave her a quick, worried kiss on the head and hurried back into the chaos. Nancy clutched the water bottle. It felt like gold. Sharp guilt twisted in her chest for lying. But the image of Nathan's thin, sweaty arm made her feet move. She didn't go to the pantry. She waited until Mama was gone, then slipped back behind the potted palms. She scanned the room. Karen was at the head table, laughing, holding champagne. Mr. Douglas watched his new wife with blurry, silly love, like a man in a dream. Nancy ran. She ran back to the dark hallway, sneakers silent on thick rugs. She reached the loose panel and pulled it open. The smell of dust and fear hit her again. Nathan, she whispered, voice shaking. It's me, Nancy. I have water. Scratching. Please? I'm so thirsty. Nancy looked at the bottle, then the jagged hole. The bottle would never fit. The hole was barely big enough for her small arm. It won't fit, she said, panic rising. I can't get it to you. No, please don't go. His voice cracked with despair. Nancy's mind spun. Think. Think like Grandpa Jim. He could fix anything. A straw. She needed a straw. She remembered seeing a glass jar of them on the bar at the ballroom entrance. She had to go back into the party. She tucked the water bottle under her thin school uniform shirt. The cold plastic shocked her skin. She crept back to the ballroom's edge. It was louder now. The band played a slow, swaying song. She could see the bar. It was crowded with men in tuxedos laughing, waiting for drinks. Nancy dropped to her hands and knees. She crawled under the long white tablecloth of an empty guest table. Dark, a forest of chair legs and discarded napkins. She moved from table to table, a small ghost in shadows. She peeked out. Close to the bar now. She could see feet waiting. A waiter rushed by, arms full of dirty glasses. He bumped the bar, and a small clear plastic container of straws fell from the counter, scattering across the polished floor. Damn it, the waiter hissed, too busy to pick them up. He hurried away. Nancy scrambled forward, quick as a mouse. She grabbed 1, 2, 3 straws, shoved them in her pocket, and crawled back the way she came, table by table, until safe in the palm shadows. She ran back to the hallway, heart hammering against the cold water bottle. Nathan, I'm back. She tore the panel away. I have straws. I'm gonna push one through. Can you get it? I'll try. She fed one straw into darkness, like threading a needle blind. She pushed gently until it hit brick. I can't reach it, he whimpered. Wait. Nancy pulled it back. She connected 2 straws, fitting one inside the other, making it longer. She pushed it back in slowly, gently, wiggling it. I have it. His voice was a sudden sharp gasp. I have it. Okay, hold on. Nancy's hands shook so badly she could barely unscrew the water cap. She put the straw end into the bottle opening. Okay, she whispered. Drink. She tilted the bottle. Water ran down the straw. From inside the wall came desperate, ragged gulping. The most terrible and most beautiful sound Nancy had ever heard. She gave him as much as she could until the bottle was nearly empty. A moment of silence. Thank you, he finally whispered. His voice was stronger. Not much, but it was there. Nathan, who did this? Nancy asked, though she already knew. Her. Karen. His voice was flat with pure childish hatred. She put me in here. Said I was a bad boy. Said I ruined everything. Why? Nancy whispered. Why would she do this? I saw her, Nathan said, voice getting fainter, tired. In the garden. By the pool house. It was Victor, the estate manager. She was kissing him. Nancy's eyes went wide. I heard her, Nathan continued, words slow. She said after she married my dad, they'd be rich. They'd have all the money. And they'd make me go away, for good, to boarding school forever. What did you do? I was mad. I told her I'd tell my dad. I told her he'd stop the wedding. I ran, but she caught me. His breath hitched. She's so strong. She said I was a liar. Said I was sick. She dragged me to my room. Nancy pictured the bride, so beautiful in her white dress, dragging a small boy. She took me to my closet, Nathan breathed. There's a panel in the back. For old pipes. She pushed me in. It's not a room, Nancy. It's just the wall. It's black. I can't stand up. Can't even sit. I'm just on my side in the dark. Nancy felt sick. She pushed me in, he cried softly. And I heard it. A hammer. Bang, bang, bang. She nailed it shut. From the other side. From my room. Nancy's blood ran cold. This hole, he said, voice fading. I made it with an old nail I found. Been scratching so long. Didn't know if it was day or night. Then I heard you. The wedding music surged. A cheer went up from the ballroom. Probably cutting the cake. Nancy knew, with sudden terrible clarity, this wasn't just about hiding him. Karen wasn't going to let him out. She'd planned to leave him here. To let him die. The wedding, the party, the honeymoon. By the time they got back, it would be too late. Everyone would think he was safe at boarding school. Nathan, hold on, Nancy said, voice fierce. I have to get into your room. Get you out from the other side. It's locked, he whispered. She locked the door. I heard her. And she has the key. Nancy's mind hit a blank wall of panic. She was just a 9-year-old girl. She couldn't break down locked doors. Couldn't fight grown-ups. She thought of her mother. She thought of Karen's threat. Then she thought of Grandpa Jim. It's about being scared to death and doing the right thing anyway. She had to tell someone. But who? Mama was out of the question. The staff wouldn't believe her. Police would laugh. There was only one person. The only person with power to stop this. The only person who might believe her. Mr. Douglas. His father. The groom. The man who was right now toasting the woman murdering his son. Nancy had to get to him. Had to walk into the middle of that glittering, massive party, past ice sculptures and champagne, and tell a billionaire his new wife was a monster. Nancy took a deep, shuddering breath. The air in the hallway felt thick and dead. The ballroom air was alive but dangerous, like a bright, loud ocean she had to cross. She stood at the edge of the dark hallway, looking into blazing light, like standing at a cave mouth looking at a burning forest. She thought about Mama. Eunice's face, pale with exhaustion. If I see you out here again, I will make sure your mother never works in this city again. Karen's voice was a cold snake in her memory. What if Mr. Douglas didn't believe her? He'd call security. They'd drag her out. Mama would be fired. They'd be on the street. All because of a story about a boy in a wall. And what would happen to Nathan? Nancy closed her eyes. She saw his thin, sweaty arm in darkness. Heard his ragged, desperate gulping. She nailed it shut. If she did nothing, Nathan would die. He'd die in the dark, alone, while his father drank champagne. Simple, horrible math. Mama's job or Nathan's life. It's about being scared to death and doing the right thing anyway. Grandpa Jim's voice was so clear, like he was standing right next to her. Nancy opened her eyes. The fear was still there, a cold, heavy rock in her stomach. But the anger was there too. Hot. Bigger than the fear. She touched the dog tags around her neck. She stepped out of the hallway. The noise hit Nancy like a physical blow. The band played a fast, cheerful song. Hundreds of people talked, laughed, shouted over the music. Clinking glasses and silverware made a constant high-pitched rain. Nancy's senses were on fire. The air was heavy with perfume, roasted meat, wine. Light glittered everywhere, from chandeliers, from sequin dresses, from diamonds on women's necks. It was beautiful. It was ugly. It was a party celebrating a woman who'd buried a child. She scanned the room. The head table was on a raised platform at the far end. Like a king's court. There he was, Mr. Ben Douglas, laughing, his arm draped over Karen's chair. Nancy started to move. She stayed close to walls, just as Mama taught her. Be invisible. She was a small brown mouse in a jungle of glittering predators. No one looked down. No one saw her. She passed a group of waiters with silver trays. One, a tall man named Robert, spotted her. "Hey, kid, you're not supposed to be in here," he hissed, grabbing her shoulder. "Where's your mom?" I have to," Nancy stammered, trying to pull away. "You're gonna get Eunice in trouble. Come on, back to the kitchen." He started steering her toward the service door. "No," Nancy shouted. Not loud, but desperate. She twisted hard and slipped from his grasp. "Hey," he called after her, but couldn't leave his post. Nancy ran. She was in the open now, on the main floor. A woman in a giant feathered red dress stepped backward, not seeing her. The woman's sharp heel landed on Nancy's sneaker. Oomph! Nancy fell to her knees. "Oh my word," the woman exclaimed, looking down like she'd stepped on trash. "Whose child is this? How dreadful." She didn't offer a hand, just turned back to her conversation. Nancy scrambled up, knee stinging. She kept going. Halfway across the room now, she could see the head table clearly. She saw Victor Langston, the estate manager. Tall, thin, face like dried leather. He was the one who could fire Mama with a snap. Mr. Langston saw her. His eyes narrowed. He started moving toward her like a shark cutting through water. Nancy panicked. No time. She dodged left, slipping between two men arguing about golf. She ran straight toward the raised platform. Almost there. 10 more feet. A hand shot out and grabbed her arm. Not a waiter. Not Mr. Langston. The grip was iron strong. Fingers dug into her skin just above the elbow. Nancy looked up. It was Karen. The bride had seen her. She'd gotten up from the table so fast, so silently, no one noticed. She stood in front of Nancy, blocking her path to Mr. Douglas. Her smile was still in place. Partygoers just saw a beautiful bride bending down to greet a small child. But Nancy saw her eyes. They weren't eyes. They were blue flames. "You," Karen whispered, voice a low vibrating growl, a sound of pure, bottomless hatred. "You stupid, stupid little girl." Her fingers tightened. Nancy winced. The pain was sharp. "I warned you," Karen breathed, face inches from Nancy's. The smell of jasmine and wine was suffocating. "I told you what would happen. Now you've done it. You just cost your mother everything." "Let me go." Nancy struggled, but the grip was steel. "You're going to turn around," Karen commanded, voice deathly quiet. "You're going to walk back to the kitchen. You're going to get your mother. And you are both getting off this property. If you say one word, one sound, I will personally call the police and tell them you were trying to steal. Understand me?" Nancy looked past the glittering white dress. She could see Mr. Douglas. He was watching them, small confused smile on his face. He thought his new wife was being sweet to a staff member's child. He raised his glass in a small toast. Karen saw him look. Her smile widened. She used her other hand to pat Nancy's head. Horrible mocking gesture. "Such a sweet girl," she said, just loud enough for her new husband to see the kindness. Then her eyes snapped back to Nancy. "Get out. Now." This was it. This was the moment. Nancy could turn around, save Mama's job, let Nathan die. Or she could do the right thing. Nancy thought of her bleeding knuckles. She thought of the desperate scratching. She thought of the dry, weak voice. "Please, water." She looked at the beautiful, terrible woman holding her. This woman who kissed her new husband while she left his son to rot in a wall. The anger finally boiled over. Hotter than fear. Hotter than pain. "He's in the wall," Nancy said. Her voice was quiet but clear. Karen's smile flickered. "What did you say?" "He's in the wall." Nancy said again, louder. She stopped pulling against Karen's grip. She just stood and looked her right in the eye. "Nathan. I heard him. I gave him water. You locked him in." For a split second, the mask fell. Nancy saw the real Karen. Pure distilled panic. The blue eyes went wide with shock and fury. The grip on her arm loosened just for a moment. It was all Nancy needed. She planted her good foot and screamed. Not a child scream. A raw, piercing sound of pure terror and rage that cut through the music, the laughter, the clinking glasses. "No. Let me go. You're hurting me." She ripped her arm free from Karen's shocked grasp. The entire ballroom went silent. The band stopped. A violin squeaking to a halt. 300 guests, Mr. Langston, all the staff, everyone turned. Stared. Nancy stood in the sudden vast silence, panting, arm throbbing. She pointed a trembling finger, not at Karen, but at the man still sitting at the head table, wine glass frozen halfway to his lips. "Mr. Douglas," she shouted, voice cracking. She locked him in. She locked Nathan in the wall. A vast, heavy silence pressed down on the ballroom. 300 mouths open. 300 pairs of eyes fixed on the small 9-year-old black girl in the school uniform standing alone on the polished floor. Nancy was shaking, but she didn't lower her arm. She kept pointing at Mr. Douglas. Mr. Ben Douglas slowly, very slowly, put his wine glass down. His face was a mask of confusion. "What?" he asked, voice not angry, just bewildered. "What did you say, child?" Beside him, Karen burst into a high, tinkling laugh. Terrible, brittle sound. "Ben, darling, I am so sorry," she said, stepping back toward the table, putting a hand on his arm. This is just dreadful. This is Eunice's girl, the maid's daughter. She's been a problem all night. She's clearly overtired and confused." She turned her sharp, beautiful face to the guests. "Please, everyone, I do apologize for this interruption. Mr. Langston, would you please handle this?" Mr. Langston, face pale and furious, strode toward Nancy. "You come with me." "Now." "No," Nancy cried. She sidestepped him, eyes still locked on Mr. Douglas. "She's lying. Nathan is in the wall. In the dark hallway. He's alive." "This is insane," Karen said, voice louder now, sharp with indignation. "Ben, this child is lying. Nathan is at boarding school. We have the enrollment papers. He's been difficult. You know that. He probably paid this girl to say this to ruin our day. I am not lying." Nancy shouted, voice raw. She felt a new, horrible wave of panic. They weren't believing her. They were all looking at her like she was crazy. "Nancy. Oh dear God, Nancy." A new voice cut through the tension. It was her mother. Eunice ran into the ballroom from the service door, face white with terror, dish towel in hand. She ran to Nancy and grabbed her, pulling her close. "Mr. Douglas, Mrs. Douglas, I am so sorry." Eunice stammered, tears of pure fear and shame welling. "I don't know what's gotten into her. She's not well. We're leaving. We will go right now. I'm so sorry." Eunice tried to drag Nancy away, pulling her toward the kitchen. "You have ruined us, Nancy," she whispered, voice breaking. "What have you done?" "No, Mama, you don't understand." Nancy fought against her mother's grip. "He's going to die. She'll kill him. That is enough." Karen shrieked. The elegant mask was gone. Her face was a twisted knot of rage. "Security. Get this lunatic child and her incompetent mother out of my house." Wait. It was one word, but it stopped everyone. Mr. Douglas stood up. He was a tall man, and the power in the room instantly shifted to him. He was not smiling, not confused anymore. He looked for the first time like the billionaire who ran a global empire. He looked at his new wife. He looked at the terrified maid. And then he looked at Nancy. "Child," he said, voice quiet but carrying across the silent room. "My son is on another continent. What you are saying is a very, very serious accusation." He paused. "Why should I believe you?" Nancy's heart was a drum. This was her one chance. She stopped fighting her mother. She stepped forward. "Because of this," she said. She held out her right hand. In the bright light of the ballroom, everyone could see. Her knuckles were raw and bloody. White plaster dust and gray grime were caked under her fingernails and in the lines of her palm. "I got this," Nancy said, voice clear and strong, from pulling the panel off the wall. The panel she hid behind. Mr. Douglas stared at her hand. "And this," Nancy said. She reached into her pocket, fingers fumbling. She pulled out the 2 plastic straws, still wet, and the nearly empty water bottle she'd shoved under her shirt. "I gave him water. He was so thirsty. He said he's been in there for days. He used a nail to scratch the hole I found." A low murmur went through the crowd. This was not a vague accusation. This was physical evidence. Karen's face was ashen. "This is a trick," she said. "She's a performer, Ben. Don't be a fool. It's a shakedown. They want money." Nancy took another breath. Remembering, "She threatened me." Nancy said, "She said you wouldn't believe me. She said I'd be in trouble. She said she'd make my mom lose her job if I told anyone." "She threatened you?" Mr. Douglas's voice was dangerously low. "Yes. In the hallway. Just before. She grabbed my arm." Nancy pointed to the spot on her arm where Karen's fingers had dug in. A faint red mark was already forming. Mr. Douglas looked at his wife. Her eyes were wide with a frantic, hunted look. "And I know why she did it," Nancy pushed on, words tumbling out. "Nathan told me. He said he saw her. In the garden, by the pool. He saw her kissing Mr. Langston, the estate manager." The gasp from the crowd was loud this time. Victor Langston's face went white. He said. Nancy continued, voice unwavering, that he heard them. He heard her say that after she married you, they'd be rich. And they'd send him away, forever. He told her he would tell you. And that's when she grabbed him. Lies. Karen screamed. All of it. Vicious, filthy lies. She lunged not at Nancy, but at her husband. "Ben, my love, you can't believe this. This is poison. This is that boy's last hateful attempt to ruin us. He's at boarding school, I tell you. Call the school." "All right," Mr. Douglas said. He looked at his wife, eyes cold and unreadable. "We will." He turned to Mr. Langston. "Langston, get my phone. Call the school. Now, put it on speaker. Sir, it's the middle of the night. I don't care if it's the surface of the sun. Call them. Get the headmaster on the line. I pay him enough to answer." Mr. Langston fumbled for his phone, hands shaking. "And in the meantime," Mr. Douglas said, turning his gaze to the dark hallway where Nancy was pointing, "we are all going to take a walk." He looked back at his new wife. Her face was a perfect, beautiful mask of pure terror. "You'll come with me, my dear," he said. There was no warmth in his voice. "And you," he said to Nancy, "you will show me." He started to walk. The party was over. Mr. Douglas marched across the floor. Nancy, still held by her shaking mother, walked beside him. Karen, face like stone, was forced to follow. Behind them, a silent, stunned crowd of guests trailed like a grim parade. They reached the dark private hallway. The paintings of angry men and stormy seas stared down. "Here," Nancy said, voice small again. She pointed to the wall, beside the painting of the dark forest. "It's here, behind the panel." Mr. Douglas looked at the wall. From a distance it looked perfect, but up close, with 100 eyes watching, they could all see it. The faint outline. The way the wallpaper didn't quite sit flat. "Ben, this is madness." Karen whispered. "You are tearing our wedding apart because of a maid?" Mr. Douglas ignored her. He stepped forward and put his hand on the panel Nancy had pointed to. He pushed. The loose drywall, which Nancy had failed to secure, popped inward. It fell into the darkness with a soft thud. A puff of cold, sour air and plaster dust came out of the hole. From the crowd, someone gasped. Mr. Douglas knelt. A billionaire in a tuxedo on his knees in a dusty hallway. He peered into the black narrow space. "Nathan," he called, voice rough. "Son, are you in there?" A long, terrible second of silence passed. Then, from the darkness, came a voice. Not a child's voice. The dry, broken croak of an animal. "Dad." Mr. Douglas choked. A sound, half sob, half roar, tore from his throat. "He's in there." His voice broke. "Oh my God, he's in there." He bellowed, plunging his arm into the hole, just as Nancy had. "I feel him. He's alive. Get him out. Get him out now." All eyes snapped to Karen. She didn't run. She didn't speak. She just stood there, white dress looking like a shroud. Her face was blank. She had lost. Nathan said. Nancy spoke, voice clear in the horrified silence. That she nailed it shut. From the other side. From his room. Mr. Douglas stood up. His face was terrifying, purple with rage, eyes streaming with tears. "Langston," he roared. "Get a crowbar. Get an axe. Get anything. Break down his bedroom door. Now." Mr. Langston didn't need to be told twice. He was a loyal employee, but he was also complicit. His face was a mask of grim terror. "Robert, Frank, with me," he shouted to two burly security guards. "Get a fire axe from the hall closet." The entire wedding party surged forward. Decorum gone. Glitter and glamour evaporated, replaced by raw mob-like energy. They moved out of the ballroom, a wave of tuxedos and silk following Mr. Douglas, who was half running, half stumbling toward the grand staircase. Nancy and Eunice were swept up in the crowd. Eunice held Nancy's hand in a death grip. She wasn't angry anymore, just gone, eyes wide and blank with shock, a passenger dragged by the horrible tide. They thundered up the curved marble staircase, the sound of 200 expensive shoes echoing like an avalanche. Only one person did not move, Karen. She remained at the entrance to the dark hallway, a statue in white, her billion-dollar wedding dress pooled around her feet. The guests, in their haste to see the horror, parted around her, giving her wide berth as if she were diseased. She stared at the empty space where her husband had been. Her mask of indignation was gone. Her mask of beauty was gone. There was nothing left but cold, hollow emptiness. She had bet everything. And in 1 second, a 9-year-old black girl with plaster on her hands had taken it all. Mr. Douglas saw her stop. He paused at the top of the stairs and looked down at her. "Frank," he called back, voice echoing in the massive foyer. "Stay with my wife. Do not let her out of your sight. Wait for the police." Frank, the security guard, nodded grimly. He took a position 10 feet from Karen, arms crossed. The bride was now a prisoner in her own wedding. Mr. Douglas turned and ran down the upstairs hall. They reached Nathan's bedroom. The door was solid oak with a shiny brass knob, locked just as Nathan said. "Stand back," Mr. Langston yelled. He and Robert lifted the heavy red fire axe. The axe bit into it inches from the lock. A woman in the crowd screamed. Wood splintered. The sound was violent, tearing through the quiet luxury. Crash. The lock mechanism shattered. Mr. Langston kicked the door. It flew open, slamming against the inside wall. Mr. Douglas pushed past him. He didn't even see the room. He ran straight for the closet. It was a walk-in closet, large, filled with small expensive suits and rows of tiny shoes. Mr. Douglas tore through the clothes, throwing them from racks. Nathan. Nathan. And there it was. At the back of a closet, where there should have been solid wall, was a piece of pale, unpainted drywall, held in place by 6 long silver screws drilled directly into the studs. A crude, hasty job. A job done by someone strong and in a hurry. A drill. Mr. Douglas roared. "There's a drill in my study. Go." "No time, sir. Let's use the axe," Robert said. He still had the axe. "Cover your face." He swung the axe sideways. The blunt end, the hammer side, smashed into the center of the drywall. It punched a hole. Terrible musty smell puffed out. The smell of a crypt. Mr. Douglas clawed at the hole, ripping the plasterboard away with his bare hands. His tuxedo tore. His fingers bled. He didn't notice. The guests and staff piled up at the doorway, silent, horrified audience. Nancy and Eunice stood at the back, Nancy just tall enough to see between adults' elbows. Mr. Douglas tore the last piece of drywall away. He froze, stared into the blackness. The space between studs was barely 2 feet wide, dark, filled with cobwebs, old insulation, thick dust. At the bottom, curled in a tight ball, was Nathan. He was in his rocket pajamas, filthy, stiff, with dried sweat and plaster. So pale. His skin was gray. His lips were blue and cracked, covered in fine white dust that made him look like a small stone statue. His eyes were open, but dull, staring at the light, but not seeing it. A sound came from the crowd, a collective weeping gasp. Several women turned away, sobbing into their hands. Mr. Douglas made a low animal sound. The sound of a heart breaking. He fell to his knees. "Nathan," he whispered. "Oh God, my son, what did she do to you?" He reached into the wall, his big strong hands trembling violently. He gently, so gently, touched the boy's shoulder. At his touch, the boy's eyes flickered. They found his father's face. "I knew you'd come," Nathan whispered. "She said you were on her side. I told her you'd come." "I'm here," Mr. Douglas choked, tears streaming down his face, cutting clean paths through the plastered dust on his cheeks. "I'm here, son. I've got you. I've got you." He slid his arms under the boy's limp body. He was terrifyingly light. Mr. Douglas lifted his son out of the wall, out of the grave his new wife had built for him. He pulled Nathan to his chest, holding him, rocking him, face buried in the boy's dusty matted hair. "I'm so sorry, Nathan," he wept, voice muffled. "I'm so sorry. I didn't see. I didn't see." Nancy watched. She felt a cold, deep sadness settle over her. This was the moment of rescue, but it didn't feel like victory. It just felt broken. Everything was broken. Eunice finally let out the breath she'd been holding. It came as a sob. She pulled Nancy into her side, her arm a steel band around her. "Oh, Nancy," she whispered, voice shaking with profound understanding. "Oh, my brave, brave girl. What did you do?" Her voice cracked. "You saved him." The fear for her job was gone. All that was left was a mother's awe and a mother's terror. "Someone call a doctor." Mr. Douglas roared, standing up, his son cradled in his arms. "Call an ambulance. Now." He turned and pushed through the stunned crowd. He didn't look at anyone. He just had one focus, his son. He walked out of the bedroom, down the hall, back to the main staircase. He moved with terrible focused purpose. He walked right up to Karen. She was still standing there, watched by the guard. She looked up as he approached, face pale and defiant. Mr. Douglas stopped, one step above her. He held his son out. Nathan was barely conscious, head lolling against his father's shoulder. "Look at him," Mr. Douglas commanded. His voice was not loud. It was dead, cold as the space between walls. "Look at him." Karen's eyes darted to the boy's gray face. She flinched, a small involuntary twitch. She tried to look away. "I said look at him," Mr. Douglas shouted, the force making her shrink back. She forced her eyes onto the child. "This is what you did," he said, voice shaking with rage, so deep it was almost silent. "This is what you did. On our wedding day." Karen said nothing. Her lips were a thin, bloodless line. "The wedding is over," Mr. Douglas said. "Everything is over." He looked at the security guard. "Frank, call the city police. Tell them to send every car they have. Tell them it's attempted murder." He turned his back on her. He didn't give her another glance. He held his son tight and walked down the stairs, pushing past horrified guests, shouting for water, for blankets, for his doctor. He passed Nancy and Eunice, huddled by the hallway entrance. He stopped for 1 second. His eyes, ravaged by tears and fury, met Nancy's. He looked at the small 9-year-old girl. He looked at her cornrows with beads. He looked at her bleeding, dusty hand, still clutched by her mother. He didn't say, "Thank you." The words were too small for what she'd done. He just looked at her. And in his eyes she saw the whole terrible story. The guilt, the gratitude, the pain. He gave a single sharp nod. A soldier's nod. A nod of shared understanding. A nod that said, "I see you." Then he was gone, rushing his son toward the front door, just as the first wail of a siren grew in the distance. Nancy, Eunice, and the 300 guests were left standing in the ruins of the party, the sound of an axe echoing in the silence. The sirens grew from distant wail to piercing shriek. Red and blue lights flashed through tall arched windows, painting marble walls in colors of panic. The wedding guests did not leave. They were frozen, watching a play they'd never bought tickets for. 2 police officers were the first through the door. Big men, their blue uniforms and heavy belts looking rough and real against the silks and velvets. Who called it in? One officer asked, hand on his radio. I did. Mr. Langston stepped forward, face gray. On behalf of Mr. Douglas. The suspect is over there. He pointed. The officers walked toward Karen. She was still standing at the foot of the stairs. No longer a beautiful bride. Just a woman in a very expensive dress. She looked small. Ma'am, the first officer said, we need to ask you some questions. Karen looked at him. Said nothing. Face as blank and white as her dress. Ma'am, we're investigating attempted kidnapping and attempted murder, the officer said, voice hesitant, as if he couldn't believe the words in this house. It was Victor, Karen said. Her voice was flat, monotone. It was all Victor, the estate manager. He hated the boy. He did it. I didn't know. One last desperate lie. Ma'am, the officer said, voice hardening. He'd heard lies before. We already have a patrol car picking up Mr. Victor Langston. He's in custody and very cooperative. He's telling us a very different story. Karen's last bit of hope died. Her shoulders slumped. Karen Douglas, the officer said, pulling out steel handcuffs. You are under arrest for the attempted murder of a minor, kidnapping, and conspiracy. He turned her around, movements practiced and impersonal. He didn't care about her dress. The sound in the massive silent foyer was sharp. The click of handcuffs locking around her wrists behind her back. The bride in her diamond dress was arrested. As the officers led her toward the door, she had to pass Nancy and Eunice. Karen stopped. She looked at Nancy. Her eyes, which had been blank, were now filled with dark, cold fire. A look of pure, bottomless hate. A look that said, I was a queen, and you were just a mouse, and you did this to me. Nancy didn't shrink back. She didn't cry. She just held her mother's hand and looked back. She met the woman's gaze until the officer gently pulled Karen away, out into the flashing lights. The party was over. The guests began to leave, quiet, stunned herd. They filed out, faces pale. They'd have a story to tell for the rest of their lives. Finally, the house was quiet. Just Nancy and Eunice and a few staff walking aimlessly, picking up glasses, not knowing what else to do. 2 hours later, just as the sky outside turned from black to a soft bruised gray, Mr. Douglas walked into the kitchen where Nancy and Eunice waited. He was not the same man. He'd changed out of his torn tuxedo into a simple gray sweater and slacks. His eyes were red and swollen. He looked 20 years older, like a man pulled from a deep cold ocean. He walked over and sat down at the staff table with them. For a moment, he just looked at his hands. He's going to live, Mr. Douglas said, voice hoarse. Eunice let out a breath she'd been holding. He has severe dehydration, malnutrition. He broke 2 fingers trying to scratch the hole. His voice caught. The doctor said 1 more day. That's all he had. Maybe not even that. He looked up. His eyes met Nancy's. He asked for you, Mr. Douglas said. Nathan. He asked, where's the girl? The girl who gave me water. I told him you were safe. Nancy just nodded. Mr. Douglas struggled for words. He was a man who commanded boardrooms, who could buy and sell companies. But he didn't know what to say. I am a fool, he said, voice low. I am a blind, arrogant fool. I saw what she wanted me to see. I believed what she told me. And my son was paying the price. He was right above my head. He rubbed his face, pure exhaustion. And I was toasting. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a checkbook. Eunice, he said, you are the finest woman I've ever had in my employ, and you will never have to work for anyone again. He wrote on a check, pen stroke sharp. He slid it across the table. Eunice looked at it. Her eyes went wide. She quickly put her hand over it as if it were fire. Sir, I can't. It is not a gift, Mr. Douglas said. It is a debt. The smallest payment on a debt I can never, ever repay for my son's life. He looked at Nancy. And you can go to any school you want, any college, anywhere in the world. I will take care of it, all of it, for the rest of your life. I want you to have the chances you deserve. He stood up, still a billionaire, but just a father too. a father who'd almost lost everything. I must go back to the hospital. Nathan is asking for me. He paused at the kitchen door. Your grandfather, he said, looking at Nancy. He was a war veteran? Nancy nodded. He taught you well, Mr. Douglas said. He taught you to see what other people don't. He paused. He must be a very good man. He was, Nancy said. Mr. Douglas nodded. And then he was gone. Nancy and Eunice sat in the big empty kitchen. The sun was coming up. The light was soft and gray. Eunice was crying softly, head in her hands. The check was crumpled in her fist. Nancy looked down at her own hand. Her mother had bandaged her knuckles with a small white bandage. Neat and clean. She thought about the big, loud party. She thought about the beautiful people in expensive clothes, all laughing and talking. But they hadn't heard a thing. They hadn't seen the dark corners. But she had. She was just the maid's daughter. She was supposed to be invisible. But she had heard the cry in the wall. Grandpa Jim was right. Bravery wasn't about being strong or loud or important. It was about being scared and doing it anyway. It was about listening very hard for the people who were too quiet to be heard. And it was about not ever looking away. Nancy touched the dog tags around her neck. And she knew, she finally understood, what courage really meant. Nancy Herbert, 9 years old, the maid's daughter, the girl who refused to look away. Her grandfather taught her that bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's doing right when fear's screaming louder than your heartbeat. And she proved him right. If stories like this speak to you, if they make you think, or feel, or remember what matters, kindly subscribe to our channel now by clicking on the subscribe button. We're building something special here, a community that believes in the power of courage, compassion, and truth. We'd love to have you with us. Before you go, I'm curious, where were you while you listened to this? Making dinner? On a drive? Winding down for the night? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely love knowing. Also, comment below and tell me, who's your Grandpa Jim? Who taught you what courage really means? Thanks for being here. Until next time, stay brave.